there's a life cycle to presidencies. And as you will point out, during the first few years, he's trying to ensure that you build a strong foundation upon which you can build, that you attract top talent to serve on the team, that you build a strong cabinet that is able to advance the university's aspirations as have been articulated in our strategic roadmap. And once you have that in place, then the presidency becomes more externally facing as a means to attract more resources. So I spend a lot of my time in the Capitol advocating for NAU in front of the legislature and the governor. I spend a lot of time trying to attract resources from donors and alums, meeting them where they are and making a good case as to why they should invest in this university. And I spend a lot of time in advocacy work and national groups that are focused on trying to create the conditions for universities like NAU to be able to grow and advance their missions. And that's more on the policy level. What happens in Washington, D.C., what happens here in Arizona at the state level, what happens in Coconino County, what happens in Flagstaff, the city of Flagstaff, all of that, one way or another, affects us. And so those are the motivations for being more externally facing. I'll tell you that that's the least favorite part of my job, right? The semester, for example, because it is we're getting into a budget cycle now with the state, I had to make the tough decision of not teaching this semester. I've been teaching for 3 semesters in a row after 13 years out of the classroom. I was really enjoying it. But about 3.5 months of the next 6 months, I'm sleeping at some hotel somewhere. And I was telling somebody earlier that I'm old enough that I'd rather sleep with my own pillow now. So we had definitely a very unfortunate incident recently in the forestry building due to some air oil handlers that all functioned and the temperature variations that, of course, we're subject to here in Flagstaff. The subject of flooding in older buildings at NAU is something that is happening all over higher ed in the country. Recently, to devastating effects at ASU during last summer, and the reason for that is deferred maintenance, which is to say the universities over the last decade have been forced, public universities, because of disinvestments from their states, have been forced to make tough decisions to manage their budgets. And one way that this has been done nationally, and it's going to be a crisis soon, is by deferring maintenance on buildings and facilities. And so eventually, like if you don't change your roof in your home on time, it's going to come back and bite you. And we're seeing that nationwide. At NAU, we spent about a year, 2 years ago, on development of a campus master plan that really looked at the deferred maintenance issues on campus, looked at spaces that needed to be beautified or enhanced, and looked at new buildings that we may need to create. And we articulated a 10-year plan on how we could take care of all of that. The reality, however, is that it all depends on resources. We already know what we need to do. One of our top priorities in the budget negotiations this semester. So the Arizona legislature meets from January to June. The governor recently presented her budget. Now the legislature and the governor have until June 30th to agree to something. July 1st, we need a budget, right? The state needs to agree. As a university and part of the tri-university system, one of our 3 top budget asks is what's called an allocation under the speed bond program, which we're asking the state to give us $350 million to the 3 universities. Or they don't give us $350. They give us authorization to issue bonds of up to $350 million so that we can deal with deferred maintenance and we can deal with new buildings and so forth. And then when it's time to pay that back, the bondholders back, the state pays 80 cents out of every dollar, right? So it's a subsidized way for us over time to catch up. Currently have a small group that's looking at how we ensure that our what we call the auxiliary services on campus are at a scale and at the level of quality that our residential enrollment demands. And that not only includes, for example, in the case of dining, it does not only include the capacity of our spaces and the variety, but also the ways in which we handle food, for example, right? We have students from all over the world with different considerations that need to be taken into account into how food is prepared, what's on the menu, etc. And so we have a group that's working on that. I will say to you all that the whole issue of auxiliaries on campus is super important for us in terms of not only providing the right level of service to our students so that they can persist and have a good quality of life here in college, but also very frankly and very candidly because of resources. Because of disinvestments from the state, we rely mostly on tuition fees and auxiliary revenue. And we have to make sure that we are providing the right levels of services and doing so in a way that allows us to cover the costs without putting more burden on our students in terms of finances. And so I mentioned the complexity of that because it's to illustrate that we indeed are very mindful of these issues and are working through them. But it's always hard. But we're getting some traction. We're super happy that we have the level of residential students we have. The master plan I mentioned earlier includes up to 1,800 more beds that we would build on campus, getting rid of we have some space on campus plus some older buildings that we would demolish to put in this case, a residence hall, and then move that, the programs that were in that old building to a new building somewhere else on campus. So it's all part of a bigger strategic plan, but it always boils down to resources. What we've noticed is that a lot of our students, for various reasons, once they leave campus to off-campus housing, on average, it doesn't take too long for them to be back on a wait list to get back on campus for cost, for a variety of reasons, right? Location, etc. And so given what I was saying earlier about the way our finances are structured, we have an obligation, both morally as well as fiscally, to figure out how we meet those needs. In terms of the low cost of the ensuring there's more low cost options in our residence halls, we have already started doing some of that in the last year and a half without building any new buildings. We've created about, I'm going to say 500 beds, additional beds, by converting doubles to triples and singles to doubles where there was demand for that. And obviously that translates to a lower cost to the students while allowing the university to still be able to pay our mortgage, right? Many of these buildings are actually mortgaged. Our university right now is about 22,000 students residentially, and we have 8,000 students across the state. We have 21 campuses or sites across the state plus online. So we have 30,000 approximately total. Of the 22,000 here, about half live on campus. Right? We're in the top 1% in the nation in terms of residential students. The largest we have ever been in terms of enrollment was 2018. 2018, we had locally about 2,000 more students than we do today. The way the university is looking at this in terms of planning, enrollment, auxiliaries, residence halls, dining options is, unless the state starts reinvesting in the universities, and this is not just a problem in Arizona, by the way, it's most states across the country. There's some exceptions. Our way to maintain quality and advance our mission in terms of providing access to excellence, the route is through additional students. We have to grow in students. But how many more students can we have? Well, probably 2,500 or so, whatever we had in 2018. Right? Even though we have more beds, etc., it would be pushing it. And this is a town of 75,000 people. We can't just continue to grow. And so we are looking at all of our financial planning, our facilities planning through the lens of how long would it take us to hit the peak enrollment that we had several years ago? How do we ensure that in doing so, most of those students would be residential, right? That we're providing them the amenities they need to stay on campus? And how do we do it in a way that will honor our commitment to accessibility and affordability? Our Office of the Dean of Students is working with Greek Life. We've instituted in the last couple of years several new programs to not only ensure that we're providing the education necessary to our students, but also laying out what the policies and accountability for not adhering to those best practices are. We've gone as far as having a team work with national organizations in terms of trying to get best practices from other communities to shape the work that we're doing. And I think we are in a good place. It's always a challenge, but I think we're in a better place than we were. Last email I read before I came in here is a group discussion in cabinet about precisely those executive orders. Just in general, without getting into details, there's too much that we're still trying to understand from the dozens of executive orders that were issued. NAU will always work to advance its mission and protect its values while adhering to the law. So that's the tension there. What we would do for any particular, how to address any particular executive action would be framed in those terms. And like I said, literally before walking here, we have a team, including our legal counsel, our government affairs vice president, sifting through all of those EOs and trying to figure out which ones affect NAU. I'll be very frank, I'm working in the same way I was working before. That was a very difficult point in this administration and in higher ed nationally. I stand by the decisions we made. They were very thoughtful, purposeful, deliberate. We're once removed, so for a real-time accounting of how we managed it and how we spoke about it with the university community, perhaps Kim can share the link. I don't know if it's high up in our webpage, but of all the communications that we did during that very trying period. But what am I doing now? The same as I was doing always before, is trying to do the right thing. I'm the president of NAU, but I'm also a person and a father and a husband and a grandfather and a dog owner. And the comments have been turned off on Instagram for everybody. They're not being selectively filtered or anything. It's just, if I follow you, you can comment. If I don't, then you can't comment. You can leave your little heart, please do so. But and the reason is that it got very, very vicious. It wasn't like the volume, the tenor, the DMs, the way that they referenced my wife, the way that they referenced my kids, my ethnicity, my values, my commitment to the public good and decency, was something I was not interested in allowing to happen. Why? Why would I do that? I would never censor individuals. I would never just go through the feed and block individuals. But there's something to be said about having differences of opinion, of having extreme differences of in the ways that we think about how we as individuals should exercise our roles, in this case, the role of a president, to advance certain causes. That's fine. We can debate that all day. But don't bring my kids into it. So 2 years ago, we declared the year of academic momentum at NAU, and it helped us sharpen our focus and get record levels of retention and graduation rates. This year, we declared this year as the year of strategic finance, and we've really been able to focus in on how do we, with the challenges that we were talking about before, financial challenges, how do we continue to invest in our people? How do we continue to elevate our quality. And so in fall 25, academic year 25-26, that will be the year of AI empowerment. I haven't said this to anybody, but except my team. It's going to be the year of AI empowerment. The reality is that we've already done a lot of good things on this campus. We have a strong foundation. We're better positioned than most public regional universities and certainly rural universities. But the advances are so vast, and the social implications, the climate implications, etc., so urgent that we will declare the next year as the year of AI empowerment, but we will establish a AI advisory group this semester in the next few weeks that will help us craft a framework for how next year we will hit the ground running to try to accelerate our engagement with these technologies in a way to ensure that we're part of shaping the technologies and not the technologies shaping us later on. And that will be the sense of urgency that we bring to it. On issues such as climate, there's a lot of considerations that we must make there. As with everything, it's a moving target, right? So our first impression of AI, and which continues to this day, is that it could be a disaster for the climate and for Earth. On the other hand, the incentives, the market incentives are such that the energy cost per prompt is going down significantly, and there is a market incentive to get there. And so the question is, when it gets to the point of a prompt being the equivalent of a Google search, what does that mean? How do we engage in that discussion? What I think we can't do as a university, especially as a university, is wait until all these things are figured out to engage. And that's why we know it's an issue. We're going to debate it. So what is NAU's role in ensuring that our data centers are energy efficient? We can't solve the problem for the world. We have a carbon neutrality goal by 2030. Our incursion into AI has to be mindful of that. Can't be in contrast. There are ethical concerns about the use of AI and bias in the data sets. How are we going to manage that? Academic integrity concerns. There are concerns on whether or not automation will displace workers. How do we feel about that at NAU, right? How do we advance our work in a way that will augment and enhance the contributions of our faculty and staff without displacing? So all of those issues are why we're going to jump in very deliberately. That cut we've managed. We have been able to, given our budget projections and through containment of costs, we have been able to maintain a good net margin to ensure that we're financially solvent and sustainable as a one-time thing, right? Today we announced compensation increases for our community. We did not impose a mid-year tuition surcharge like others across the country. The problem with that cut is that it's recurring. It was to our base. And so the way that this state and most states budget is that they start with whatever you had last year and they give you a little more. But last year they cut from what we had. And so now every year we have that deficit. So anticipating that is why that could be a problem. It's why we designated this year the year of strategic finance. And we've gotten to the point where we're doing a 5-year projection of our finances to ensure what does enrollment need to look like, retention, everything, right? So that we can stay above water. And we feel pretty good about that projection, but it requires more focus from our university community in what we are always focused on, which is student success. If we can ensure that we keep improving our retention rates and graduation rates while maintaining a robust admissions process, even as the number of high school students that are graduating is going down, right? When we manage all of those things, we should be okay. But to be honest, we've gotten to the point where it can't be through containing cost. We've contained as much cost as we can, right? We're running in a very lean way, very efficient way. It's about raising revenue. Of course, we'll continue to make the case at the state level that it is worth investing in another year, and ASU and U of A. But I'm feeling confident about where we are. How am I doing? I'm doing well. I'm very appreciative of this university, of this city, of this state. We've been here now 3.5 years. As some of you may know, we came here after spending 5 years in New York City, including a 9-month lockdown in Manhattan during COVID, in our little tiny apartment. And so we came here with a lot of hope and expectations on, building a not only a new career part of my trajectory, but also a life, and we're just very happy. In terms of the university, I'm so proud. I mean, and I say this, and Kim knows it. In any room I am, I tell people, throw a metric out there, and I'll tell you that we are either at record highs or trending in the right direction. Right? Graduation rates, retention rate. We've raised $168 million, which goes also to your question. The donors are very important. $168 million as of last week since I started. So 3.5 years, $168 million. That's more than this university raised in the previous 11 years, right? And we're maintaining that momentum. So we will soon, in a couple of weeks, be announcing that we have been designated a Research One institution, right? I mean, I could go on and on, but the point is that we're happy, we're proud, we're excited about the future. There's a lot of good things that will be coming out. So the challenges and the hard days and perhaps the more personal weight that sometimes you encounter is offset by that.